Alright guys, so I'm going to show you how I made this yellow and blue preset. So how I used my red and teal preset to get my yellow and blue preset. So we're changing up the color palette, going from a red and teal to a yellow and blue. So if we get straight over here, this is my red and teal preset applied right now. So you guys would have heard of an orange and teal color palette. So over here on the color wheel, orange and then teal is over here. This red and teal look is very much the skin tones fall a bit more into a red. There's a bit of purples in there, and then the teals are very light blue. So if we look at the original for this, they go much more of a light blue, and therefore we get a red and teal palette or complementary colors. Over in this yellow and blue preset, we want to shift the complementary colors to much more of a yellow and blue, so the skin tones will fall much more into a yellow and orange, and then the blues are going to fall much more into a deeper blue. So I'm going to show you how to turn the red and teal complementary colors and twist them in the color wheel to get the yellow and blue, and mainly doing that with the curves. So here we have the red and teal applied in this image as well, image applied. And the reason I use my preset that I've already made to make another one is because I know exactly how the reds got there in this image, or I know exactly how the blues become that kind of blue. I'll break that down for you, because if I know how the reds got there in the skin tones for this preset, I know how to change them as well. So let's break down how these colors are in this image. Okay, so as we said, we've got a touch of red, more reddish skin tones. So the way they get here is there is a tiny bump to the reds there. It's very small, so if I show you the other curves, it's very small. But what is a bigger change is the green curve here, and the green curve gets pulled down quite a bit. So right here, the green curve has been pulled down a lot more than the other colors. Most people think your skin tones come from the mid-tones here, but a lot of your skin tones come from this area here. This is actually the area I focus on the most when getting the skin tones, is these shadowy skin tones. Pulling down the green introduces purple, and the reason we want to introduce purple is because we want to get reddish skin tones. Some people will think, well, if I want red skin tones, I'll just add in red. And I mean, I have done that the slightest amount. It's very small, but that's not how I get these. So I pull down the green curve here, and what that is going to do, this is my friend here, he's tanner than most people, so he falls into a pretty rich orange. And when you add purple to an already orange skin tone, it's going to push that more into a red. And then you might ask, well, where'd the purple come from? Purple comes from pulling out the green. It introduces the opposite color, which is purple. So we are adding in purple by taking out green, and then that is pushing our already orange skin tones into a bit more of a red. And then I help this out a touch by putting a tiny bit of red in the midtones compared to the other curves. The other thing that's going on in the curves here is there's a lot of blue in the shadows. I wanted lots of blue in the shadows, so this part of the curve is brought up a lot more than the other curves. But I didn't want the blues to get too much in the skin tones, so as you can see up here, the greens and reds, they sit a bit higher than the blues. So by the time it gets to this brightness, those blues are starting to get pushed out, and those blues are kept in the shadows. Because if you look just there, right where the mouse is, and then look at the greens and the reds, they're just ever so slightly more than the blues there. The highlights are pretty balanced, like there's no, the greens and the reds and the blues, they're sort of all very balanced there. There's no real tactics going on there. Probably the HSL is taking care of turning those blues and the highlights into teals. Okay, so you're probably thinking not all of these colors are coming from the curves, like they'll be coming from all these other settings as well. Well, if we just turn off hue and then turn it back on, let's turn it off, there's not a huge change there. It's actually not doing all that much to this edit. Main thing is just turning those blues into a bit more of a teal, so we get that color palette between the red and the teals, get that nice complementary color going. But that's about it. I mean, there's a few other changes like the yellows. There's not much in this image. So I'm going to show you guys how I took this, because I know where these colors are coming from, and if I know where they're coming from, I know how to change them and then put them into a yellow and blue color palette. Okay, so here we have the red and teal one. Let's change it into this yellow and blue one we have over here, twisting the color wheel, getting different complementary colors, different palette that looks really nice. So the first thing I'll do to try to achieve this look is maybe look at the highlights. So a really yellow creamy highlights is very obvious to me in this style. So I'd come down to blues and I would just pull the blues down a bit, and as you can see we introduce a lot more yellows. Yellows are the opposite of blue. Then I'm also just slightly going to do that to the midtones, because I want those yellow tones to be coming pretty much into half of the image. So I'm gonna just introduce a few more in that space there. Okay, so we remember for the red and teal look, we pulled out lots of green to get more purple to bring out the reds in the skin tones. But I don't want those reds in the skin tones anymore. So I'm gonna pull up the greens, and that's gonna really pull out a lot of those reds in the skin tone. Okay, so that looks good. We pulled out a lot of that red from the skin tone, and now I want to do it to the shadows as well. So as you can see right here, we have lots of redness in those skin tones there. We don't want that. We want this yellowy, bit more of a yellowy orange look rather than a red. So I'm going to come over to the red, and I'm just going to drop it here in the deep shadows, because as you can see, if we use this point here, we put it over our skin tones, you can see these are very dark skin tones. So this is where, if we move the curve, it will be affecting. So back over here, let's just drop these reds a little bit to get less in those dark shadows. And then the opposite to red in the curves is cyan. So we get this nice kind of blue coming into the image there. We pull out those reds. Okay, done pulling out a bit of red there, and then the opposite to red is that little bit of cyan, so it helps with the blues coming in a little bit as well. And there's a pretty obvious thing I need to change in the HSL about this style. So we, like I said, we're going for a much more of a deeper blue than a teal. So I need to shift these teals across to a deeper blue over here, and that helps out a lot with getting those nice deep blues. And then another thing is I'll just slightly shift the oranges across to this side, and that will also help get those more yellow skin tones that we want. Okay, so we look a little too green in the shadows here. We need more purple. We maybe put too much green in. Green down, introducing more purple. You can see that in the skin tone as well. And then I'm just wondering, like, do I drag it across or straight down? So across is where and how much of the image, and then down is like the intensity. So I'm thinking I'll go back to where I was, starting from here. I'll probably just go straight down and maybe a little to the right. Okay, so we're looking a little too warm throughout the brighter areas of the image, so maybe we'll just back off on the warm tones in the brighter areas, and a touch more in the mid-tones. There might be a few too many yellows in there at the moment. Okay, that's looking pretty good. The exposure is slightly different in this image from the other one, but we won't worry a bit too much about that. Remember, we don't worry about contrast, we're just looking at color. Okay, and now I want a bit more cyans to the image. We maybe have too many reds again still in the skin tones. So maybe if we just drop the reds ever so slightly, some cyans in there. And again, we might have too many purples, so back to green. Add some more greens in, and then just to quickly make the match up a bit better, drop the whites and maybe the highlights up top. And what might be throwing you off about the edit over here on the left, it's actually got a big radial filter helping the big glow over here, so we'll just do it ourselves over here. What it has is just a tiny bit of warmth, and then exposure, and then dropping clarity for that glow. Yeah, now we're looking pretty close. So I want a touch more orange or richness to the brighter yellows. I want the yellows to be a touch more orange. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit more red, because at the moment we've got a yellow but we want an orange. So I'm going to go to the red curve and just put in a touch of red, and that will leave us with a touch of orange. Okay, just a touch. Okay, so I'm going to grab the settings as if I was saving it as a preset, copy settings. I'm going to not grab white balance, but everything else, not brushes, not lens corrections, but we'll grab everything, copy, and let's get over to another image. Okay, so pasting it on as if we were applying it as a preset, paste, let's brighten it. As you can see, we get those nice tones in another image. And then if we just drop the temperature maybe, we get those nice blue tones, and then those nice yellowy rich skin tones. Rather than a red and teal, we've gone for much more of a yellow and blue. And then if I just very quickly played around with the contrast and stuff with this image, like I'd want to make it that you can see the background, so I'd maybe bring down the exposure, then you have to bring up the shadows and contrast, down the blacks maybe, up the blacks, shadows, contrast. Yeah, and I personally don't like clarity, so I'd maybe take clarity down, even a touch of texture. Okay, so you can see how you can get these blue and yellow tones, and then I would keep doing that, applying it to other images. So to make this image a bit better, I'd maybe bring up the saturation of the yellows, because I really want to accentuate them, and see we get some more yellows like in these cushions here. And like originally these cushions had no color in them at all, but since we've played with the curves, we've put a bit of warmth in there. And then just touch up your skin tones if you want. And then this was our red and teal, and back to yellow and teal. Yeah, with a bit more playing around, we could make that look really good. And then yeah, apply it to heaps of images, but changes. Here's it on this image too, that I've already edited. So something like that, maybe a bit less grain. But yeah, that's how we went from a red and teal, how I made the yellow and blue. You know how the red and teal colors got there? What is putting those red tones and the skin tones there? What is creating those nice teal blues? We can use the color wheel, understand the mixing and matching of colors. Red and blue make purple, pulling out the green introduces purple. That's how I created this yellow and blue preset. Continue to paste it on a few other images until I feel like I got the settings just right, and I'd keep saving presets, keep updating them. I'd have maybe 5 yellow and blue presets on the side, continually just testing them out over and over on different images, different lighting, just changing them a little bit, just like you just saw, and then you would have something you really, really like. And that's it for this one, guys. Catch you in the next one.